Running an online business requires passion, knowledge, and a lot of dedication. Adding the complexities of setting up and managing hosting for your website piles on more work when you already have so many plates spinning. Whether you manage one WordPress website or dozens, Kinsta's managed solutions give you access to a platform that's optimized for the fastest speed, has enterprise-grade security features, and is powered by an intuitive custom dashboard with everything you need to manage your sites efficiently. Plus, Kinsta provides human-only WordPress expert support, which is available 24/7, 365 to assist with even the most complex sites. Forget frustrating AI chatbots. Kinsta gives you complete peace of mind by ensuring that your WordPress sites are always online, secure, and performing at their best. Start your journey with Kinsta today and get your first month free. Don't have time to migrate your site? Kinsta takes care of everything for you. Learn more at kinsta.com/podcast. That's KINSTA.com/podcast.
If you're a facilities manager at a university, you know students rely on the cafeteria for breakfast, lunch, dinner, and the occasional late-night snack. So when a dishwasher breaks down and dirty plates pile up, the mess hall can turn messy in the blink of an eye. Enter Grainger. With over 1 million industrial-grade products and fast delivery, the product you need now is never far away. So you can turn that dishwasher back into a lean, clean washing machine. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, private investigator Ed Opperman. Today we have Christopher Bollyn. He's the author of the book Solving 9/11. And has his website is called Bollyn.com. Christopher, are you there? Can you hear me?
Yes, Ed, I'm here.
Okay, great. I thought I had you on mute there. Okay. All right. So, Christopher, tell us about yourself. Who is Christopher Bollyn?
Yeah, I was an investigative journalist working in Washington, D.C., starting in June 2000. And when September 11th happened, I happened to be passing through New York City. And it sort of fell right into the kinds of stories that I had been researching. That is, these kinds of catastrophes, unsolved crimes in which governments cover up the crime, basically to protect the guilty, and in which hundreds or thousands of their people are killed. And so I started, investigating 9/11 pretty seriously in September 2001, and continued doing so for until today. And I wrote a book called Solving 9/11: The Deception That Changed the World, and that came out in print in April of 2012. And then there's another book called Solving 9/11: The Original Articles, which contains all my articles from 2001 through 2012. And these books are pretty unique in the literature about 9/11 because I'm the only researcher about 9/11 who has investigated deeply into who's behind it, what is the network, who are the people who are behind the crime, and equally importantly, who are the people behind the cover-up.
Okay, you say you were a journalist in Washington, D.C. Where were you working?
I wrote for a weekly newspaper on Capitol Hill called the American Free Press.
Okay. And how'd you wind up in Sweden?
Well, my wife is Swedish, a Swedish citizen, and the thing is that in 2006, after we investigated and discovered evidence of nanothermite, that super thermite in the dust of the World Trade Center, myself and people that were involved in this discovery faced some difficulties with the government, and because this was a discovery that was not supposed to happen. And when it did happen, the people who were behind the discovery, involved in the discovery, and talking about this found themselves in some trouble. And I was attacked by undercover police at my house in outside Chicago, and maliciously prosecuted. And after a very corrupt legal process in the summer of 2007, I went into exile. I left the United States and went to Europe. I've been living in Europe since then.
Okay, so in 2006, you were attacked by the police at your home in Chicago. What caused the police to come to your house?
They were undercover police. It was an undercover tactical unit. These were
You know what? I think I remember reading about this. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, you probably did. What happened is that I had been surveilled by people who said they were informants of the FBI. I had gone through this kind of harassment, if you will, for several years. And so I had been back and forth to Europe and living in safe houses in California and what have you. And then, in August 2006, I had just been home. We had just been home in our house in Chicago there for about a week after being away for about a year. And I noticed that this car was driving around my house with these 3 men who were obviously armed and wearing body armor. And I called the 911 number to ask the local police to help me, identify who are these people that are driving around my house, armed for combat. And lo and behold, this car came to my house. They hijacked basically the police call, and they came to my house, and that resulted in a confrontation on my driveway, where they refused to identify themselves and they attacked me. And in the process of jumping on me, they fractured my elbow and tasered me while I was being held down. And then I was prosecuted. I was prosecuted for having resisted the arrest of these unidentified men and assaulting them, both of which were completely false. But when you're in a position I was in, trying to defend yourself against the illegal police actions like this, it's like trying to sue City Hall.
So then what was the disposition of the case?
Well, the two charges I told you about were both misdemeanor charges. It went to trial. I had a trial. The trial actually was a 4-day trial in June of 2007, in the first week of June. The jury came back with a hung jury. Then the judge sent the clerk back there with special orders, special instructions to the jury, and then it came back with a conviction on both charges. And I was given then a 2-week period or so before sentencing. And having seen how corrupt the process was and how rigged the whole system is in Chicago, I decided to take Plan B and to make a strategic retreat to Europe.
That's how you ought to have been sweet. Okay, now it's starting to make sense.
And so I'm I go to America on tours. I've spoken in maybe 30 states in the last couple of years, but Chicago is not on the itinerary. Yeah,
you can't go to Chicago. Yeah, if they pick you up somewhere else, they're probably not going to extradite you back to Chicago. But I wouldn't go back to Chicago to live for. How much time were you faced in Chicago? Under a year, right?
No, the maximum period of sentencing could have been 1 year.
Yeah.
1 year in Cook County Jail, but I had no intention of putting my family through that kind of suffering and situation after having been through a long period of malicious prosecution. There's no, you can't subject yourself to mistreatment from a criminal government.
And how much did all the legal cost? How much was that?
Thousands of dollars. Yeah. It was a long period. I went through several lawyers and, a 4-day trial, the whole works. And my evidence was destroyed, dismissed, not allowed, and my expert witness was not allowed to testify. The whole thing was corrupt.
Interesting. What was the expert? What was his expertise?
He was a police expert. He was I think his name was Johnson. He was an expert on police procedures in Chicago, and he was going to testify as to how these police behaved, what they did, and if that's correct. Of course, it wasn't correct, and so the judge didn't want this expert witness to testify. So that's the way it worked. It was a rather complex thing. It's written about in the large book, but basically what I discovered was that there was a police conspiracy to harm me. And the situation was that the 3 men who came to my house were part of an undercover unit, and the officer that led this team was also working for the Department of Homeland Security. And so it looks like this was an operation that actually was initiated at a higher level than the local police.
Did you ever find out through discovery what they were doing in the neighborhood in the first place?
Yeah, they gave us a bogus answer. They said that they were doing traffic stops.
Okay.
They were complete nonsense.
Okay.
But the thing is that it's I was dealing with a very corrupt. Hoffman Estates is the town. It's the village of Cook County. It's outside Chicago. It is the only village in the only suburb of Chicago in that area where the police do not have to go to have any college degree at all. They don't have to go to school beyond high school. And so the situation is that the people who were involved in this attack at my house, their only expertise, their only training in being police came from the U.S. military. And they had just been, they had served as military police in Iraq. And they were very happy to do the bidding of the federal government and to, attack me. And they had all been conditioned, they'd all been informed by the ADL, for example, that I was a radical, right-wing, whatever you want to call it, neo-Nazi militia guy. All nonsense, all rubbish, but that's what they do. They get these people so that they are prejudiced against you before they even meet you.
Wait, so you're saying that these cops, these undercover cops, had prior knowledge of you in that neighborhood, and they were briefed by the ADL?
Yeah, it looks like that was the case. And they probably knew who I was. I mean, their superiors knew who I was because I had run for mayor in the election the year previous to that. I grew up in that town, and in 2000, I think it was, we had an election, and the previous mayor had passed away. So it was like an election where there were completely new candidates, and the mayor's son was running, and the mayor's right-hand man was running, and I got in on the ballot as a third candidate, and so they knew who I was. I was running on an anti-corruption platform.
Okay, and you were running like as an independent?
Well, yeah, independent.
Okay. Mm-hmm. All right, let me ask. Now, your expertise is in solving 9/11. Okay. And now I guess, but we don't have to guess. You've been working on it about 15 years, right? That's when 9/11 happened. Right now, what do you make of the recent news in the past week? All this stuff about these 28 pages and Saudi Arabia. What do you make? What's your take on that?
It's a red herring. It's the 28 pages is. I compare it to this Russian wooden doll called a Matryoshka doll, where you have a doll inside of a doll inside of a doll. You've probably seen these wooden dolls that are Russian. Sure. And each doll is painted with a different figure. So if 9/11 is very much like that, it's a crime within a crime within a crime. And the cover-up is equally complex. It's a deception on top of deception on top of deception. There are layers of deception. And this 28 pages is just another layer of deception. The evidence indicates that 9/11 was and is a Zionist operation at the highest level. Israeli and Zionists like Michael Bloomberg and Michael Chertoff in the United States. These are the people who are involved in it. These are the people who are involved in the cover-up. The Saudis are not architectural level players in any way in the 9/11 crime. So this discussion, CBS News had a thing on 60 Minutes about the 28 pages, and it's being laid out there as a layer of deception so that people now in the run-up to the elections will get this impression that Saudi Arabia is somehow responsible for 9/11. Saudi Arabia might be responsible for a lot of things and a lot of bad things, but they're not the key players in the 9/11 crime.
You say they're not key players, but do you think that they were players at all?
No, but the thing is that what you find is that the Saudis have a lot of money, a lot of loose money to spend, and you find that, for example, in this computer company called P-Tech in Quincy, Massachusetts, which plays a key role in this computer crimes of 9/11, it's an enterprise software company. It was explained to the American people that P-Tech was a Muslim-owned company started by a Lebanese Muslim immigrant who had some Saudi financing behind the company, and that the Saudi financier was somehow tied to some Al Qaeda. Now that may all very well be true, but what was not discovered by the people who talked about P-Tech was that the person who was running the company and had been running the company since 1994 was a Jewish guy from Worcester, Massachusetts named Michael Goff, who was working for the Mossad at the same time. Now, you see, that's what I'm saying, is that you can have Saudi Arabia or some Saudi person may very well have given these two Saudi men in San Diego some money and helped them rent an apartment. But that doesn't mean that this has anything to do with the 9/11 crime. You see, you have to understand that there's a lot of money is given to people back and forth here and there, but it's not tied to the crime. It's simply almost like what's the word for it? It's like something that looks indictable, something that looks culpable, but it isn't. To understand this, you have to really understand how these kinds of trails are laid. First of all, these two characters that we're talking about, these two alleged hijackers, we don't have any proof that they were actually on the plane that hit the Pentagon. Secondly, we don't have any indication that that plane hit the Pentagon. I mean, so it's like we're talking about these two Saudi men who may have received money from another Saudi, but the question doesn't, we haven't even gotten to the point where did Flight 77 hit the Pentagon? And were these two men on Flight 77? And those questions haven't even been answered yet. So the question about Saudis giving money to Saudis is moot.
Did I lose you?
No, can you hear me?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I thought I lost for a second. Okay, so it was moot. The last thing you said was moot. Okay.
The question is whether the Saudis gave money to another Saudi is not really important. The important thing is to understand, what happened at the Pentagon. These 19 Arab men, 15 of whom are Saudis. We don't have any proof that these planes with these men actually hit any of these targets that we're talking about. The World Trade Center was hit by two planes, but those two planes do not appear to have been flights 11 or flights 175. And secondly, the plane that hit the Pentagon or whatever hit the Pentagon, we have no proof that that was Flight 77.
Yeah, a lot of people are more convinced it would have to be some kind of a missile. No, how about that? Now, if it was a missile, how would the Israelis pull that off?
Well, the thing is that this was a very complex crime. And how these military operations were done is very complex. In my book, I talk about several aspects of the crime. For example, the military operations that were going on that day. Operations that mimicked exactly what happened. And where planes were being hijacked, and the air traffic controllers in Rome, New York, for example, the Northeast Air Defense Sector, had a screen full of false inputs where they didn't know what was real and what was false. So that when the actual hijackings occurred, the people who were in charge of defense of the U.S. North sector didn't know if it was real or if it was fake. That's very important. Now, whatever hit the Pentagon, it appears that it was a missile, as you say, that was may have been launched by a plane that was flying over the Pentagon, because whatever hit the Pentagon came in very low and made a small hole, and then appears to have gone through the Pentagon to an inner courtyard and left another hole on the inside ring. It's not possible. It's not physically possible for an airplane like a Boeing to have done what was done to the Pentagon.
So then your conclusion is it would have to be a missile?
Yes, it was something like a missile. It may have been a weaponized drone. What we see is exactly what we saw hit the World Trade Center, Towers 1 and 2. Those were weaponized drones, which appear to have been modified Boeing 767 tankers. What hit the Pentagon, though, may have been something like a Global Hawk platform or something like that, a UAV, an unmanned aerial vehicle that may have very easily have made that flight pattern that came in at a low level, fired the missile in the Pentagon, and then gone in there behind the missile. And being a plane that's made out of glass fiber and things like that, there would be a lot less debris from a UAV than there would be from a Boeing 767 or 757. The problem with the Pentagon is, of course, we have no evidence of the durable parts of a plane, like the landing gear and the jet engines, being taken out of the Pentagon. Nor do we have, you can't have, we have pictures of the Pentagon with the outside wall of the Pentagon is a meter thick, 1 yard thick of masonry and reinforced concrete. And we have a picture showing a small hole in the Pentagon before the wall collapsed. Now, there is no evidence of a Boeing aircraft on the lawn, and yet there's not enough holes on the building to allow that plane to go through or into the building. So it can't be. It can't be. There cannot be a Boeing 757 or 767 hitting the Pentagon and either not going into the building or finding itself on the lawn. It's just not possible.
Let me ask you a question. What do you make of these videos that you see on YouTube all the time that show the planes hitting the World Trade Center where the nose cone goes in and the nose cone comes out the other end?
Yeah, it's very odd. The thing is that what we see with the Flight 175 hitting the South Tower, which is what you're talking about.
Yeah.
That plane, just before it struck the building, had a missile pod on the bottom of the fuselage, on the bottom of the plane. And just before the plane hit the building, it fired a missile-like object that then went faster than the plane and struck the wall of the tower just a millisecond before the plane hit. And this created a large hole, an openable hole into which the plane was then allowed, the fuselage of the plane entered. Now, this missile, I think it was probably a depleted uranium warhead, penetrated through the building and came out the other side. We know that. But I don't think that missile and that missile would have penetrated through so cleanly, completely, and allowed that the nose of the plane to come out the far side of the building intact, because the nose of a passenger airline like that, or a Boeing, is actually a very sensitive and not very strong part of the aircraft. The fuselage is not the strongest part of the aircraft, and even though the missile went before the plane and opened up the hole, I find it highly unlikely that the nose of the plane would have come out. There's a good chance that video is not authentic, but we do see the videos of the plane hitting the tower, and if you see what comes out the far side of the building, we see that there are two objects that come out with great momentum in front of the explosion, and one is burning white hot, and another one is a piece of a missile tube. So it does indicate, it does suggest that a missile opened up the hole and the plane went through the building, went into the building easily, but I find it highly unlikely that the nose of the aircraft could have come out the far side of the building in any shape intact.
Yeah, we just had a plane here just take off from Vegas here this morning, and it hit a bird, and they had to make an emergency landing. It broke the windshield, so obviously these things are not made to go through with steel and cement buildings.
Right.
Now,
right.
Your theory is that this was an Israeli Mossad operation. Now, was this with the knowledge and cooperation of the U.S. government, or without our knowledge and cooperation?
Well, when we say Israeli Mossad operation, that's kind of shorthand for Israeli intelligence. I wouldn't pin this on the Mossad. What I think happened is that in the 1970s, late 1970s, when the Likud came to power in Israel, when the ideation of the 9/11 plot became very apparent in movies and discussions and suggestions and predictions, what have you, I think that there was created a secret unit, very much like the way Shimon Peres had created the Lakam to get stuff for Israel's nuclear arsenal. There was a secret unit created, and that secret unit carried out the operation over the decades, prepared for it, set it up. And in this secret unit, there are people like Shaul Eisenberg, Yitzhak Shamir, Ehud Barak, Bibi Netanyahu, people like that. But I think this may be a situation where the Mossad was not involved actively as a team, that this was rather a secret unit, compartmentalized unit of very dedicated people to making this thing happen, many of whom are high-level Israeli intelligence, military intelligence, and political players. That's what I would say. That's what I think happened.
Okay, but now
these people set up the whole operation over a period of time. We know that Shaul Eisenberg, he's Mr. Mega Israeli over there in China. That, for example, when in 1987, a company that he created specifically for the purpose called Atwell Security of Tel Aviv tried to get a security contract for the World Trade Center in 1987. And the people that were involved in snegotiations were two very high-level Mossadnik players, Zvi Malkin and Shalom Ben-Dor. And these are the former heads of Shin Bet, former heads of, they're very high-level people. They were involved in Eichmann kidnapping in Argentina. They were involved in shipping plutonium from Pennsylvania to Israel. So they are Mossad players, but they're older guys, very high-level, and dedicated to this project.
Yeah, but now, was this with the knowledge and cooperation of the U.S. government?
No. No way.
Really?
No. Yeah. The American government, however bad it is, the American government, as an institution, does not condone mass murder of its own people for a war in foreign countries that doesn't serve any purpose. You have to look at the results of 9/11. I wrote an article just today called "The Crimocracy and the War on Terror." But the net result of this atrocity, the 9/11 false flag terror attack, is the war on terror, domestically and foreign, and then the war in Afghanistan, and the war in Iraq. These wars have been extremely costly for the American taxpayer, very detrimental to American prestige, and very, very costly for both the nation and the military. And there is no national benefit whatsoever for the United States of America. On the other hand, the Israeli Prime Minister himself, Bibi Netanyahu, said very clearly and openly that we, speaking in Hebrew to the Israelis, we are benefiting from one thing, and that is the attack on the Twin Towers, the Pentagon, and the American struggle in Iraq. He said that in 2008. So, it's like, who benefits from it and who pays the price? So, but there are people in the American government, in the U.S. government, even today, there are these people who are also Israeli nationals and people who are in very high positions whose first loyalty is the state of Israel. And in 9/11 saga, the most conspicuous one of these people is Michael Chertoff, who was the Assistant Attorney General at the Department of Justice, who was obliged to investigate the crimes of 9/11 and prosecute the guilty. There was no investigation because he, rather than investigate the crime, he allowed the FBI to basically confiscate the evidence, and what they didn't confiscate, they destroyed. Now, he was Assistant Attorney General. He was part of the U.S. government, but his main loyalty, his first loyalty, is the state of Israel, not to the American people or the United States. You understand what I'm saying?
I do understand what you're saying, but okay, what about Giuliani and Bernard Kerik?
Oh yeah, those are just. I would say that people like Giuliani and Kerik are what you would classify as useful idiots, people who are compromised, of rather low characters, who are basically controlled by the Zionist establishment of New York City and New York State. And, Giuliani comes from a family of mafia people. Bernard Kerik is almost in the same category. And these people were, controllable, just like Governor Pataki.
Yeah.
These are people who were in positions, high-level positions, or like Michael, or like John Ashcroft, or George Bush, for that matter. But at the Bush level, at the president of the United States level, we had a very strange situation where we had the son of a previous president in office, where his father, the former president, was making telephone calls to the son every day, telling him what to do. And we have a situation where you have the Bush family and the Clinton family and the Israelis who together have a long history of committing very, very serious crimes. Iran-Contra comes to mind. And other very serious crimes like, taking over the Soviet Union and destruction of the Soviet Union, and buying up its assets and things like that. You have where these three families, the Israelis, the Bush family, and the Clintons, have a history of committing crimes together and covering up for each other. And that's what we have going on there. So that it's like 9/11, the crime of 9/11 was, as I said, a crime within a crime within a crime. One of the key aspects of the crime itself was the destruction of evidence and securities that were in the basement of Building 6. And when those items were destroyed, when that evidence was destroyed or taken away or stolen, crimes of very, very high level crimes, financial crimes, could no longer be prosecuted. And that protected certainty.
Okay, real quick before we take a break. Now we have Carrick, who was the police commissioner at the time, who was formerly the commissioner of departments of corrections. Now, after this incident, after 9/11, then down the road, he was going to become Department of Homeland Security, and then he faced charges. He actually did time. He went to prison. Now, what would prevent him at that point, if he had this inside information that he knew in advance? Either he was. I can understand. Okay, if he was.
He's not. Bernard Carrick and Giuliani are not architectural level players. They are not people who are involved in the actual managing or carrying out of the crime. The design. A crime like this has three layers. There's the architectural level. The people who carry out the crime, design the crime, be blamed on a third party in order to affect public opinion. So this crime was carried out in order to swing American public opinion behind the idea of waging a war on terror in the Middle East against these fundamentalist Arabs. That was where Mossad planned it.
Right.
Working level, people like, go ahead.
Yeah. See, so now that's what I'm saying. See, if Carrick was in on the planning, then he couldn't deal his way out. No. I'm arguing the other way. I'm saying that if he was involved in the planning, then he's complicit in the planning. He can't deal his way out of those charges, the corruption charges that he had later on that he went to prison for. But if he was not, if he was involved in the planning, then he's complicit. He can't deal his way out. But if he wasn't involved, he has a card in his pocket that he could deal with and to get out of those charges.
Yeah, I don't know. It's the same thing like with Ehud Olmert. Ehud Olmert was the deputy prime minister of Israel in 2001. Ehud Olmert is currently in jail in Israel on similar charges for about a year. And the question is, this is again the question: which of these men that we're talking about are high-level players in the planning of this crime? And I don't think that Bernard Carrick or Giuliani are anywhere near that level. As I said, they're more at the useful idiot level. They're people who are under the control of, their advisors and people that get the information, and they do what they're told to do, basically. And the same thing with Ehud Olmert, because Ehud Olmert the evidence indicates that Ehud Olmert was in New York City on September 11th. And he was flown out on an El Al 747 later that afternoon with a whole bunch of Israelis. Does he understand the whole thing? I don't know. I find it very unlikely that he does. I think that he's probably not a key player in the planning, even though he's a high-level liquidnik. It's a very small group of people, as I said, who are involved in planning such a crime, a very small level. And then the actual carrying out of the crime is so tightly compartmentalized that people do things to further the operation, not understanding the entire plot at all.
We're here with Christopher Bollyn, author of Solving 9/11. It's a series of books along the theme of solving 9/11. Now, Christopher, back to this thing about the U.S. not having any knowledge or cooperation. What about, are you familiar with the story about how the FBI was unable to get to the scene right away because they were at a training mission at the other end of the country?
Oh, okay. I didn't know about that.
Yeah, you heard about that, right?
No, you mean in New York City?
Yeah, that the tactical response team that normally would have responded there in New York City was at the other end of the country on a training mission. Okay.
Well, there were a lot of situations like that.
Yeah.
The guy that was running FAA operations that day was in Puerto Rico. A lot of people who should have been in their positions on that day were not there. This is part of the planning. Part of the planning. The culprits understood exactly how the network operated and should have operated on 9/11. For example, vis-a-vis the FAA and NORAD, the military response. And those communications were intercepted and changed. For example, the planes that were on the way to intercept planes over New York City were diverted out into the Atlantic Ocean at subsonic speed. This clearly shows that they were sabotaged. Their response was sabotaged, and that the people who were running the operation had sabotaged these planes so that they went out over the Atlantic Ocean rather than going to New York City. And so, when you talk about this FBI team being out of town, this is just another one of these situations where the people who could have and should have responded or been in position to respond were not in place that day.
Right. So how could that be done without the cooperation of the U.S. government?
Well, when you understand, for example, that you want this player in A, B, C, and D to be someplace else that day, somebody makes plans and makes arrangements so that the FAA man, for example, suddenly is called to an operation in Puerto Rico for that day, and he's out of the office. So, for example, this is the key person who should have been in position to facilitate the military response. He was in Puerto Rico that day. Well, this is part of the elaborate planning that goes into an operation like this. And they find people, they have people in position to make these things happen, to make these arrangements. But this is not something, if you look at the 9/11 crime and cover-up, you find people that are within the U.S. government, for example, federal judges, federal investigators, federal this and that. But at every point of the crime, you find the person who did something to make the crime happen or the cover-up to go on is he may very well have a high-level position in the U.S. government, but he's a Zionist, or he's a supporter, a devoted supporter of the state of Israel, and not just putting money in the blue box synagogue, but supporting the very government that carried out 9/11, supporting the Netanyahu, supporting the Likud government, supporting Israeli military intelligence. People like Ronald Lauder. Ronald Lauder, the son of Estee Lauder, was the person who ran the privatization department of government protection of New York State. He's the person who decided that they would privatize the World Trade Center. Then it went to the next level player, who was Lou Eisenberg, who ran the Port Authority, who owned the World Trade Center. Both of these people are high-level supporters of the state of Israel. And then it went to Larry Silverstein, who is a very high-level Zionist player, again, very close friend of Mr. Netanyahu. Time and time and time again, all of the people that are involved in the 9/11 saga are like Larry Silverstein. They're very high-level Zionist players, or they are Israeli intelligence agents themselves. Where's the Saudi? Where's the Saudi?
Well, okay. Then what do you must have looked into Daniel Hopsicker's work on the flight schools down in Florida and all that, right? Mm-hmm. So what's your take on that?
Well, I know Mr. Hopsicker, and I read articles that he wrote, and I'm familiar with a lot of his work, but I haven't read his book about the flying circus or whatever it's called, the Venice Flying Circus. But I understand that yes, these alleged hijackers were involved in various flight schools around the United States, where they were ostensibly trying to learn how to fly Boeings, but all of them were basically unable to fly a Cessna. And they had very, very marginal flight skills at best. Their English language skills were very poor. They were not at all equipped to fly these large Boeing aircraft on these, highly precise maneuvers into buildings. That is the myth. And to understand how a false trail is laid for somebody, what I tell people in my presentations, I said they have to read John le Carré's book, The Little Drummer Girl, that he wrote in 1982 with the help of Israeli military intelligence, where he explains in the book, The Little Drummer Girl, he explains exactly how the Mossad lays a trail of evidence to implicate a person in a crime that they have nothing to do with. And this is done in Europe in the case of this little drummer girl. And the trail is laid all across Europe so that the investigators, when they go out and start investigating the crime, they pick up piece after piece after piece after piece, implicating Palestinian A in the crime when in fact the Palestinian had nothing to do with it. It's completely a Mossad operation, but the trail has been laid implicating that man in the crime. That's exactly what we have in Florida. In the case of Florida, 15 of the 19 Arabs the hijackers lived in Florida. Many of them lived in places like Hollywood, Florida. And many of them had been issued duplicate licenses, or they had their passports reported stolen or lost, which means that you have duplicate identities going out with the same name. So you have people going around in the state of Florida. When these hijackers are living there, you have people, Israeli agents living 1 or 2 blocks away with using the exact same identity, leaving a trail in the person's name using a duplicate license. And that is a rather complicated thing that, is a little difficult to understand. But I advise people who are interested in understanding how a false trail is laid by the Mossad to read the book, The Little Drummer Girl, and they'll understand exactly how it's done. And it's still being done today. I mean, these false flag terror attacks that are happening, it's the new norm. So it happened in San Bernardino, it happens in Paris, it happens in Florida, it happens everywhere. And in order to understand how these crimes are being done, one has to understand a little bit about what the tactics, what are employed, how it's done. And the Israelis have written books about it. They're to be read.
Okay, now you mentioned that they had gotten duplicate licenses, but then you say that there were Israeli agents down there using these duplicate licenses. Where do you get that from?
Well, maybe you're familiar with the Israeli art students.
Yeah.
The DEA report. There was this DEA report that came out in the year 2000, and it was the DEA had a document where they had been investigating. They themselves had been investigating this Israeli art student gang that had been going around the country, basically trying to infiltrate DEA offices, Drug Enforcement Agency offices, and the personal homes of their agents. And these were all Israeli art students who were really not art students at all. They were posing as Israeli art students, but they were basically on intelligence operations, trying to infiltrate DEA. Now, why were they trying to infiltrate DEA? Probably because they were involved. They're serving an Israeli intelligence operation that's involving drugs. As I said, I talked about Iran-Contra. This didn't stop. This Israeli drug smuggling into the United States didn't stop with Iran-Contra. So from this report, we can see that many of these Israelis, these art students, Israeli agents, were living in close proximity to these alleged Arab hijackers. And so then you understand that these Israelis, many of them are Sephardic Jews who come from Arabic-speaking countries, who speak Arabic, fluent Arabic, who also look like Arabs. So it's very easy for an Israeli intelligence agent to, from Morocco or whatever else, someplace like that, to have an ID of some Arab and to pretend that he's an Arab, and then to put on a show at the strip club or the bar or whatever they're doing. That's how it works. You have to lay a trail, and the trail has to be laid, and the trail has to be laid using actors, and those actors have to have credentials or identifying documents, showing the bartender or the cashier that I am Muhammad Atta. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I did.
And that's the proximity. These alleged Arab hijackers were surrounded by Israeli intelligence agents. They had these guys living down the street around the corner, and that's what appears to have been the case.
Okay, have you looked into the anthrax?
A little bit. I mean, the anthrax. I read about it, and I didn't do a great deal of research into it when it happened. I wrote a little bit about it, but what about it?
Well, because I'm just saying, it always struck me that the anthrax. They had to have been planning that for a while. This wasn't something they just threw together overnight. And the letters and stuff had all kinds of writing about, Allah Akbar, and all that kind of stuff. They were trying to pin it on Muslims as well. And so it always appeared to me that if you could if there was more attention on the anthrax investigation, that we could come up with more answers regarding the World Trade Center attack.
Well, maybe if the anthrax investigation is, it's a little bit harder because you have to have access to, the scientific findings and the analysis, and you need to know the databases of who had access to this kind of stuff. But it is definitely part of the same conspiracy. And it was all done, as you said, basically to pin the blame on Arabs, to fix the blame on Arabs. And as you said, the anthrax was part and parcel of the same operation to basically sow terror in the United States, fear in the hearts of Americans, and to put the blame for that fear then on the fundamentalist Muslims. And that's the name of the game, and that's still the name of the game. And now the latest phase is the ISIS. And now we're using B-52 bombers, we're bombing ISIS positions in Iraq and Syria. I mean, this game has been going on now for 15 years, and it's complete fraud. It's criminal fraud, the whole thing. And we know enough, though, about 9/11. We know enough to know that 9/11 is a Israeli Zionist hoax. It's a fraud, a hoax that was perpetrated by Israelis and Zionist supporters in the United States. And the purpose of that was to bring us the fraudulent war on terror, to plunder the United States and drag us into an unending war in the Middle East, in which we, the American people, and our allies are basically fighting wars for Israel.
Yeah, I actually had Richard Lambert, the FBI agent in charge of the anthrax investigation, on the show at a time when he was suing the FBI. And one thing you might want to take a look into is anybody who's ever sued the FBI about the anthrax investigation has settled out of court and they've won, because there's a lot more there that they don't want us to know.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, there's a lot more. There's a lot more to the whole thing.
Yeah.
But as I said, we don't know everything. It's like we don't know everything about how they got the thermite into the World Trade Center, how they did this, how they did that. But we know enough to know that we've been lied to, that we've been deceived, and that a criminal investigation demands to be done. What many people don't understand is that 9/11, the crime of September 11th, 2001, was never investigated as a crime. Rather than being investigated as a crime, it was considered an act of war, and cleanup commenced immediately, and the evidence was destroyed. So, 3,000 people were killed in broad daylight, and the families of those 3,000 people were all settled out of court. So there has never been a trial for any of the victims of 9/11. Never, never has such a case been closed so neatly that all 3,000 families, all wrongful death cases, were settled out.
Have you looked into the first World Trade Center bombing in '93? Okay, and what is your conclusion on that?
Well, that was an operation where just having read the New York Times at the time, we know that the FBI was very much involved in the operation. It
right.
was like a false flag. It was like a sting operation where they were paying this Egyptian colonel, $1 million to basically entrap, Egyptian Muslims in the area into culpable positions where they could be indicted for the crime of putting the bomb in the basement. And that was meant to prime the pump so the Americans would be convinced that Arabs are trying to blow up the World Trade Center. And, the prosecution was led by Michael Chertoff. Michael Chertoff was a member of the prosecution for the state of New Jersey as attorney general or the state's attorney for New Jersey. And the case was overseen by Michael Mukasey, who also went on to oversee the case of Larry Silverstein versus the insurance company for the later destruction of Twin Towers. So what you have is a very small group of people in the U.S. government, like Michael Mukasey and Michael Chertoff, who managed both the bombing of 1993 and the bombing in 2001, 10 bombing. So as I said, you have a very small group of people, and they have their tasks to carry out the prosecution or carry out the cover-up and the non-investigation of 9/11. Michael Chertoff, for example, should be indicted and charged in the United States for obstructing justice and managing the cover-up of 9/11. He should be held responsible for that, and he should be tried for treason.
Okay, I got to know, because we're getting toward the end. We've got about 5 minutes left. And when you answer, speak a little closer to the mic this time, okay? Now, I noticed you wrote a letter to Donald Trump. Why did you pick him out of all the candidates?
Well, because I just did a tour in the United States where I went to a lot of places, and many people, in every place I went, people would ask me about Donald Trump, because people are in the United States are looking for a savior. They're looking for somebody in this political morass who will pull us out of this situation. And a lot of people want to believe that Donald Trump will be that person. And so I wrote him open letter, asking if he would call for an investigation of 9/11. I haven't gotten an answer, but a lot of people believe that he will do something, and in order to kind of clarify this situation, I wrote the open letter.
Okay, so even though Trump is up to his ears with people like Giuliani and Kerrick and those characters, you still would think, and Billy Diamond, who designed the emergency center over there at the World Trade Center 7, you would still believe that Trump would somehow is not in with that group?
Oh, it's not my belief.
Okay.
He's also very in tight with the Israelis. He's the Trump Towers down in Florida on Sunny Isles Beach are actually owned by an Israeli family called the Dezer, D-E-Z-E-R, who are very closely tied to the Israeli military establishment in the Air Force, Israeli Air Force. And they paid Trump to put his name on those 3 or 4 high-rise buildings on the beach there. So he is very closely tied to the state of Israel. There's no question about it. But the question is whether if he became president, would he be detached from this criminal gang that is currently running our country? You have to understand that right now we have the Bushes and the Clintons and this criminal cabal. And the real question is Donald Trump playing the game with them, or is he his own man? And I can't say.
Okay, and how do you think his friendship with Adnan Khashoggi would fit into all this?
Yeah, I don't know. It's like Donald Trump I think Donald Trump knows a lot more about 9/11 than he lets on, but he's not at this point. He has never been a supporter of 9/11 truth. So that's what I tell people. It's like, if he hasn't been a supporter of 9/11 truth for the past 14 years, why do you think that now he would be? And I'm kind of cynical. I kind of think that the whole thing is a big circus, because American elections are a circus. And it's a circus that goes on for 2 years. But, hope springs eternal.
Yeah, they just actually, in one of the last states where they were having a primary, they were actually having the circus right next door to Trump's Trump's rally. They had the Trump's rally on one side of the street, Bernie's rally on the other side, and they had an actual circus in town right next door. Yeah. So there you go. Okay, Christopher Bollyn, thank you so much. The book is Solving 9/11. How can people get a hold of you?
Oh, they can go to my website, bollyn.com, BOLLYN.com. And the books in the first edition are all available on that website. You can read the first edition of the book on the website, or you can order the book through me for $20. You can make a donation of $20 on the webpage, and I'll send you a copy of the book. And my articles are all there. My most recent article is, as I said, the crimocracy and the war on terror. And my question is, why is it that none of the political candidates running for president in the United States today, not one single one of them, calls for an end to this war on terror? And the war on terror is a massive Zionist fraud that's been imposed on the American people, has plundered our national treasury, and has killed thousands of Americans and destroyed the lives of a million people. And why is it that there's nothing good that our country gets out of it? Why is it that not a single candidate is calling for an end to this criminal fraud? That's what I want to know.
Okay, Mr. Bollyn, that's going to be the last word. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Okay.